Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to show you my telescope setup, which I've been using for deep sky astrophotography for the last year or so, or most parts on here I've used for about a year. And I also want to give you guys a quick, more or less quick review for all the parts that you can see here, and more or less why I chose them over different parts, or just a little talk. So I think we should start on the top here with the guide scope. So the guide scope here is a Artesky, I hope I say that name correctly, Artesky 60mm guide scope. It's just a basic guide scope, or I would say a bit more basic, because it has a nice helical focuser here on the back, which is pretty handy to get perfect focus for your guide camera. And yeah, this scope is doing pretty fine so far. The stars are nice and round, and yeah, I had no problems whatsoever with guiding with the scope. Before I had this scope, I had a more or less ultra basic 50mm guide scope that everybody knows from all different brands, which is not so good, especially for focusing, where I have to manually position the camera inside the focus tube to get focus, which is a pain in the ass. And yeah, this helical focuser here makes this a lot easier. Yeah, anyway, on the front here I also have a dew heater, which at least here in Germany and some other parts of the world is necessary, at least for most of the, or not most, for some parts of the year. And yeah, I have this big one here, and I have this other one here that's not even big enough for the telescope itself, so I had to hold it in position with this little tape here. These both dew heaters are nothing special. They're just USB dew heaters without any computer control. So I have this little USB controller here on both sides, one for the big, or for the big or small, whatever, for this dew heater here, and this one on the bottom. And I always set it to low, so this USB controller has 3 different modes, so low, medium and high. And usually when I set it to low or medium, it's fine. So yeah, I mean, they don't draw too much power because they only run over USB. And so I just, every time I set up, at least I forget it, I set it to low. And this is just just to be more or less future proof for the night, because I think there's nothing worse than having random dew in the middle of the night, especially when you're like, okay, everything is set up, everything runs, I can do something else with another setup or something like that, and then you go out and see, oh damn it, the guide scope fogged up like 2 hours ago, and my guiding is shit, or something like that, or the big scope also do that. Yeah, so this is pretty important here, and also pretty basic. So yeah, on the back here of the guide scope I have my good and old trusty ZWO 120mm Mini, which is the most basic guide camera you can possibly think of. And yeah, this is and was my first guide camera, and it still works perfectly fine. So I have no plans whatsoever to replace this in the future, and yeah, it just runs perfectly. Okay, so going a bit more down, on the Losmandy plate here, where everything on the telescope here is attached to, I have two smaller parts. I have a Deep Sky Daddy USB and power hub, I would call it, or just a power distribution gadget. So I just have one cable that I run from the 12 volt output from my mount on the declination axis into this little black box here. And then I have all my other parts that need power attached to it, and then I just have one cable to power everything on here. And as I said, nothing here is special with computer control or something. I don't have a specialized power box with computer control, or a dew heater box with temperature sensors or something like that. I want to keep it safe and simple. Well, not safe is the wrong word, I just want to say to have it simple. And this Deep Sky Dad power box is the most basic one you can think of, and it works perfectly fine. Okay, just to mention, on this box here is attached a camera, of course, both dew heater bands and my Prima Luce focuser, which I will come to later. Okay, so on the front here is a Anchor. Yeah, it is a Anchor USB 3.0 USB hub, splitter, whatever, which I just, I've set it up that the cable runs down here, and I just have one USB cord that runs to my laptop, and then everything is connected over there. So my guide camera, the main camera here on the back, and the Prima Luce focuser. And sometimes I attach my flat field box also over here because yeah, it's nice and handy, and yeah, it just works perfectly fine. Yeah, everything here, as I said, is attached on this on these Prima Luce Los Mandy plates. Yeah, they're just normal Los Mandy plates. They're nothing special. They just look cool. So that's why I bought them. I also have one on the bottom here. And yeah, so I think that's all I have to say for the top part here. So let's go on the back here where the interesting part starts. So I recently, more or less recently, like, well, it's not recently, like 4 or 5 months ago, I upgraded my main camera here on the back to a QHY 268M camera. And before that I used Sony full frame cameras on this telescope here, and also a QSI 583 mono CCD camera with a smaller sensor. And yeah, this is more or less everything that I want and what I need. This is the best and latest technology with the IMX471 sensor from Sony and good monochrome filters, which I will come to later or just in a bit. And yeah, this camera is perfect. It's so good, and the combination of the telescope and this camera is just a dream. So this telescope can run full frame sensors, so that's a good thing. But since I'm using a reducer, which is inside the focus tube here, it's a 0.75 reducer from Riccardi, the small one, the M63. Yeah, I think that's the M63 version, which is, yeah, as I said, inside the focus tube here, and it's a 0.75. So the telescope has a native focal length of 550 millimeters and f5.5, and that can be reduced down to f4.1 and 412 millimeters, around about that. And this is perfect for the QHY 268, which has an APS-C sensor. And yeah, I used this setup, so the telescope plus reducer and a full frame camera, so my Sony cameras, I used that before, and it kind of works. But I think a lot of you know that telescopes and full frame sensors, they're not like best friends, especially not in the entry level or like medium level astrophotography gear. And yeah, I used it and it worked good enough for me, at least for the start. And if you're not such a pixel peeper, and if you do some adjustments with tilt and to get the absolute perfect back focus right, you can get it working, but you won't ever get absolutely perfect stars on the edges, especially not really big ones. They will always have some distortion, like astigmatism or other effects on that. Yeah, so that was one main reason why I wanted to go to the 268M. My first plan was to save up for a QHY 600, so the bigger brother of this camera here. Yeah, but when I wanted to get this one, I had to more or less downgrade my telescope, because I couldn't use this reducer on here if I want to get the best quality. So I had to buy the standard 1.0 field flattener for this telescope, and then I could use a QHY 600, but that was not really in my budget. And yeah, I think the combination now of the 268M and this telescope works perfectly fine. So some words on the filter wheel. This is the big 7-position filter wheel with the 2-inch filters, and I could have gotten the smaller one with the, I think, 36mm filters to save some cost in the actual filter wheel itself and also the filters. But I want to be future-proof if I want to in the future upgrade the telescope and also the camera for a bigger chip. And yeah, so I just went with the 2-inch filter wheel, and it actually wasn't that much more expensive. It was like 50 euros or something more, and yeah, I actually didn't care. And the other good thing is, at the same time I got this setup here on the back, the filter wheel and the camera, I got a good used, or with good I mean in good condition, a good full set of Bada filters. So LRGB, S2, O3 and H-alpha. The complete set, and with a not within the 2-inch format. And yeah, they are all inside here and they work perfectly fine. They're not the best filters. The narrowband filters, they have some halos, but I actually don't care because I'm not doing that much like narrowband images like Hubble palette, or I don't know, SHO or HOO images, so I don't care about the halos. I just want the nebula stuff. And yeah, I don't know, with processing, these halos are easily fixed, so I have no problem with that. And the narrowband filters, I think the H-alpha one is 7 nanometers, the O3 is I think 8 or 9 millimeters, and the S2 is also 8 or 9 millimeters, which is good enough for me. I don't have a huge amount of light pollution here. I mostly use this setup on under bottle 4, sometimes bottle 3.5, I would call it, skies, and these filters are more than good enough for that. And even on my backyard here on my left, which is a more or less bottle 4.5, bottle 5, these filters are more than good enough. And I'm actually not that big of a fan of too narrow filters, so I could have gotten 3 nanometer filters, but they're stupidly expensive. And yeah, as I mentioned, the Bada filters, they just work, and yeah, I have good results. I had good results with them. Also, one very important piece between the camera and the filter wheel and the field flattener or reducer is this big tilt adapter here, this tilt plate, which is from Gerd Neumann here in Germany, and this saved me a lot of trouble. So when it comes to fast telescopes, so I mean f4.1 is not super fast, but on the other hand not slow. I mean, there are telescopes with f7 and higher, and I mean for refractors f4 is pretty fast. So the problematic with tilt will get more and more prominent, especially when you have a camera with small pixels like the 268M here, and also big sensor. I mean, APS-C is not huge, but it's also big. And yeah, I mean, also the focuser, this is the stock focuser on the Skywatcher SP100, so that's a telescope. I haven't mentioned that before, but I think most of you have recognized it. The stock 3-inch focuser here on the back, it is good, but I think the weight, I mean, when I would disassemble the back here, I would just loosen this ring here, and then I could turn out the entire image train here with the camera, filter wheel, tilt adapter here, and the field flattener. This part alone weighs about 3.5 kilos. I think it's super heavy, and I think that this weight puts some strain on the focuser. And I mean, it works perfectly fine, as I said, but I think with this weight I have some tilt, and I had to get this tilt adapter here, and yeah, I wanted to get something good, and therefore I just went with the best possible option with this, which is this Gerd Neumann tilt plate. This is the M63 version. I think there is also a M48 version, which is good enough for most people. And yeah, just got a big one because M68 is big and especially good for big sensors. And also I had all the spacers and everything that is screwed on here on the back is based on M45. It is M45, and it was easier to just stop down to M68, stop up or whatever, from the tilt adapter down to M45, and then on both sides from M68 to M45, then just doing M48 to M45. I mean, it sounds easy on both ways, but especially with bigger sensors like in the future, this is more future-proof. And yeah, I don't want to step down. I mean, the setup was based on M45 alone from the beginning, so that the full frame sensor had no vignetting. Okay, so that was everything on the back here. On this side I have a Prima Luce Sesto Senso 2 focuser. Let me just rotate the telescope. So on this side here I have the Prima Luce Sesto Senso 2, as I said, which is a focus motor that attaches on the fine focusing knob of the telescope, which is pretty cool, I think. And yeah, it just works. And I never had problems with the focuser itself. On the beginning I had some problems with the focuser itself, not the motor focus. I had problems with the gears, I would call it, on the bottom here, on the bottom of the focuser, where all the screws weren't really tightened up enough, so that I had some small amount of play in the entire focuser, and yeah, that I think ruined some of my images. So I had some images with the CCD camera here on the back, or not this one camera, but at the start with the CCD camera I used before, I had some issues focusing the camera, and I actually noticed that, I don't know, a few nights after I did some images, and I always wondered why the images weren't perfectly sharp. I mean, the images were sharp, but they weren't like perfectly sharp, or not at least on like all frames, I don't know. And yeah, after I adjusted some screws down here, and also just disassembled the focuser and screwed everything back together with some new grease, and yeah, just I would call it fine-tuning myself. It now works perfectly fine, at least in my experience. I never had any problems with that. I'm always in the field with this setup here, so I can always, and I will always double check. I mean, when I set up an image sequence and I say, okay, do the autofocus, and I'm doing the autofocus, watching it, and after it has done the autofocus, before I run this session, I take a like 10 or 20 second test exposure and check, is the focus alright? And if so, then I just go ahead. But as I said, after I've done all the adjustments down here, I never had really big problems. I think I had like 1 or 2 times where the focus, especially with the narrowband filters, wasn't absolutely perfect. Because also what I mentioned with this telescope, or just the entire combination here, is that the focus has to be absolutely perfect. When the focus in the center looks perfect, on the edges it could be like a few % off, and then you have to tweak the focus a bit more so that the middle stays sharp, but the corners are getting sharp as well. All you can see here, everything which is attached on here is also staying on here, so nothing on here ever gets disassembled. The only thing that gets disassembled is the cable running from the filter wheel to the back of the camera. This is in a separate box. I have a carrying bag or like a transport box for this whole setup. I just move in the focuser to put it to a 0 position, and then I just transport it in one piece, because I really don't want to fiddle around with everything here, and especially when you have tilt problems, you don't want to disassemble everything in here. So that's why I also didn't show the field flattener in here, because I really don't want to touch this here in the back at all. I mean, when I touch it here, it's no problem, but when I screw around on here, I'm worried that my tilt is getting worse. And it was pretty easy to fix the tilt. Once I noticed, or once I knew where the tilt was, I think that was a big problem for me at the beginning, that I somehow couldn't figure out where the tilt really is, because all the screws that I moved did nothing, or huge steps, or huge or no improvements. And after some playing around, I mostly figured out that the tilt problem came, just as I mentioned, probably from the weight itself, or some misalignment on the parts back here. So I just had to adjust the bottom 2 screws here to like move the camera a bit up. So yeah, the main image tilt came from the bottom. So yeah, that is fixed now. But as I said, I don't want to touch this at all. Some more words to the telescope itself. As I mentioned, this is the Skywatcher SP100. and I absolutely love this telescope. I really love it. This was basically one of my dream telescopes since I started like doing more serious deep sky astrophotography. And yeah, I mean, a lot of you guys will know that this telescope has a good reputation for like being a good value. I mean, it is pricey with I think like 2,400 or 2,500 euros or dollars. I don't know the prices outside of Germany, but I think the prices are basically the same. It is pricey, but I think the performance is good. I mean, with the 1.0 Fear Flattener, it can support a full frame sensor, and with f5.5 it's also really fast, especially for refractors. I mean, most refractors start at f7. If you're lucky, you get a good one with f6, and then if you want something more fast, like a really good refractor with f5 or faster, then you have to go like with a Takahashi FSK 106, which is like the telescope itself without anything costs like 6,000 euros or something if you want a brand new one, and this is stupid. I mean, the quality speaks for itself, but also you will have problems with the more pricier telescopes. At least that's what I know from other people. I think that's more or less it. I'm just looking for something that I've probably missed, but I think I have everything. Yeah, I mean, a few words for cable management. I try to do my best. I think especially up here it's not my best job, because just fiddle the cables around here and then call it a day. But yeah, I mean, I would have to replace the dew heaters for that, because the cables for the dew heaters are really long, and that was basically the only way to just wrap them around here. And also here on the other side, let me just turn around the telescope again. When you look on this side here, I also try to have the best possible cable management. So I have these two cables here, which are power and USB, coming here, and when I just put the camera back in the transport box, I just unplug these two cables and yeah, have them like hanging around here, so that the ports are not damaged or not getting damaged by anything. And yeah, I have the cable. I don't know actually how I did it. I think I ran all the cables more or less, because they are also pretty long. Ran them to the front here, where I zip tied, or just made a big, yeah, but just as you can see, I don't know how to call it. Made the cables like this here, and then I think I moved I had one cable. Yeah, one cable. This here is also attached on the dew heater here, and that's going to the USB pad, to the USB hub. Yeah, and then the power goes back here to the Deep Sky Dad power hub. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm looking for parts or something that I've missed, but I think I actually got everything, which is nice. And yeah, you will find all the equipment, or I hope I link them all in the description, or just I will list them there so that you can have a look at them again. And the only thing that I can do now is wait for clear skies, because the weather is pretty bad here at the moment. So yeah, I have to wait for that. I hope you have some clear skies, and yeah, have a nice one.